House Concurrent Resolution 19 is under hearing in the Capitol building of Juneau, Alaska. Representative Babler questions language advocate Claire Helgeson following her testimony. The resolution is to urge the governor to declare a state of linguistic emergency for Alaska Native languages. It takes place in the interior of the Capitol building in the morning. Claire and Babler sit opposite each other at a table in the legislative hearing. If you'll state your name and affiliation for the record, please.
Hello, my name is Claire Helgeson. I'm affiliated with Alaska Native Language Revitalization Advocates in Juneau. I will begin my testimony now. The government and public policy have historically allowed the use of violence in the education system to prevent the use of Alaska Native languages. Policies support the racist values that Native languages are sinful, primitive, and incapable of transmitting valuable knowledge. These sentiments reflect the blatant belief of early legislators and missionaries that Western culture, through the English language, is entitled to defining knowledge and success for all peoples. Traditional knowledge encoded in Alaska Native languages has the strength to teach people to survive in some of the world's harshest climates, as well as create rich cultures of highly developed art forms, oral histories, social structures, and law. Westerners had to take extreme measures to enforce their perceived superiority over Alaska Native cultures. This measure was a physical, cultural, and linguistic genocide through the imposition of organized Western religion, organized Western education, and Western governmental systems. The trauma of the past still greatly affects us. Alaska Native peoples are resilient and have endured great hardship. This hardship has resulted in a health issue that we must face today. The government has asserted its power to weaken Alaska Native languages and cultures, but we say that it could use the same power to repay the social debt due. Tlingit language teacher and advocate Hune Lance Twishel has proposed steps that government should take to begin the process of healing. These steps are that government fully support language immersion, issue an official apology for its role in genocide, conduct surveys to show the true status of Alaska Native languages, normalize Indigenous place names, and make one semester of Alaska Native language and content a high school graduation requirement for students in Alaska. House Concurrent Resolution 19 would create awareness of the state of emergency of Alaska Native languages, provide the respect these languages deserve, and call for collaboration between the U.S. government and tribal governments. House Bill 216 was a piece of positive legislation that declared all 20 Alaska Native languages official languages of Alaska. As language advocates, we would like to see that the government honor the commitment that they made to these languages.
Well, thank you, Ms. Helgeson, for your very moving and well-researched testimony. I can't help but notice, however, that you were talking not just about language, but culture. I would caution you against saying that this bill is about culture, because it should be specifically about language.
Thank you, Representative Babler, for raising this important issue. The truth is, government has, does, and will have a role in the health of both Alaska Native languages and cultures. In the English language and Western culture, aspects of life are separated and distinguished from each other emphatically in education. However, the connection between Indigenous languages and cultures is too strong to speak of one without honoring the other. So the word culture is relevant in this dialogue.
Okay then, let's talk about culture. Despite legislation in Alaskan history, culture has continued to live on. Therefore, government cannot stop culture, nor can it support culture. Help me understand what the role of government is in all this.
Oh, what's government's role in the health of Alaska Native languages, you ask? Well, let me break it down for you. It begins in 1867 with the Treaty of Cession. This marked the United States' illegal purchase of Alaska from Russia. Article 3 of the treaty implied a distinction between uncivilized tribes and other inhabitants of the ceded territory. Members of the former would become subject to whatever laws the U.S. government saw fit from time to time. This pervasive system of legislation, the one to which you, Honorable Representative, belong to today, has not been without its racist and genocidal undertones.
Ms. Helgeson, you're saying racist and genocidal undertones? Do you think you could expound upon these very strong allegations?
Sure. The characteristics are apparent in the long list of legislation regarding indigenous peoples in Alaska and all over the continent. For instance, Sheldon Jackson was an influential Presbyterian minister and political leader in Alaska. He said that Alaska Native peoples needed to assimilate in order to survive. Under his direction, vocational schools designed to assimilate Native children were established throughout Alaska. Due to budget issues in the Federal Office of Education between 1887 and 1895, government contracted missionary societies to maintain schools in the territory of Alaska. This allowed the school system to spread more rapidly and gave full reign of the churches to exert their power over natives in the clash of cultural values taking place. In 1886, Native languages were disallowed from public schools, falling victim to the racist belief that they were insufficient to teach valuable knowledge and were inferior to the English language. In 1905, Congress gave in to public pressure to segregate Native children from white and mixed-blood natives who led civilized lives. They passed the Nelson Act, establishing a dual system of education and requiring Alaskan communities to provide education only for the latter group. Indigenous children were assimilated all over the continent. At age 14, A&B founder William Paul was sent to Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania. The school's founder, General Richard Pratt, believed militantly in acculturation and assimilation as the only viable alternative to the extermination of Native Americans. These continental government-endorsed efforts were genocidal.
Genocidal?
Yes. In the United Nations Article 2 of the Convention on the Prevention of Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, genocide is defined as causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to members of the group and forcibly transferring children of the group to one group to another group. The U.S. government is guilty on both accounts. The disproportionate statistics of violence against women, violent crime, diabetes, and suicide amongst Alaska Natives are a reflection of these acts of genocide perpetrated against them through the early legislation of which I just spoke, and they're directly correlated to the loss of culture that happened through colonization. Traditionally, there were ways to manage these issues, and things like diabetes didn't exist. This cultural genocide and the continuing exclusion of Native peoples from the legislative process today perpetuates the colonial inequity which continues to kill Indigenous languages as we speak.
Okay. Wow, those are some very powerful allegations, young lady. And I won't deny they may have happened, and there may have been a chance of them happening. But listen, that wasn't me doing that. That all happened a long time ago. You're asking me to feel bad about something that happened in over 100 years in the past. And to be honest, I woke up this morning, I don't even remember what I ate for breakfast. Am I right? Am I right? Anyway, listen, I once got food poisoning from a taco stand, but I don't resent that taco stand. I just got food poisoning, pulled myself up by the seat of my own pants and the strength of my bootstraps, and I moved on. This is one of the greatest nations in the world, and the opportunity is out there. You just have to believe in yourself and go after it. It's not healthy to hold on to grudges. Do you all know what I mean? Am I right?
Representative Babler, you say the crimes of which I speak should be left in the past, but in reality, they didn't occur that long ago. The children taken from their homes, traumatized, brainwashed, and deprived of their languages belong to the generations of people still alive today. And the laws which I've thus far listed only reached to the early 20th century. Do you want to talk about Davis versus Sitka School Board, or how about the Literacy Act?
Well, I don't think that will
since
be...
you brought it up, and it relates to more recent racist government policies on education, I'll mention them quickly. Under Davis versus Sitka School Board in 1908, the Alaska Federal District Court discussed the statutory meaning for the term civilization. The court found, in denying a petition to permit children of mixed blood to a white school, that civilization required the natives not only to adopt the white man's style of living, but also cease associating with other natives.
Jeez, that's terrible. I mean, okay, for the sake of professionalism, I'd like to ask that we avoid getting angry here. You keep using all these harsh words, and it's making me uncomfortable. I'd rather think about nice things. Nice, patriotic things. Oh, say does their stars span. The hills are alive with the sound of music. Everywhere you go,
Representative Babler?
everywhere you go. The Olsen twins.
Representative
You are
Babler.
America's sweethearts. I wonder what they're up to. I should Google that later.
Representative Babler.
What? What's going on? What's happening? Why are we all upset?
Excuse me, Representative. My harsh language seems to have distracted you. My apologies. What I meant to say is that HCR19 would be a positive step towards raising awareness of the current state of Alaska Native languages. To have young people learning their native languages in school would be empowering to them and their communities. This could be the positive change that the youth need to feel like they can make a change in the world.
So, are you suggesting that all the kids are going to be forced to learn one of these hard symbolic languages? If my kids are forced to learn Tlingit or Yupik, how are they going to get into college? My son can barely speak English. And isn't this a slippery slope here? I mean, I'm just playing devil's advocate, but what's going to happen to us? My son is going to Harvard.
Honorable Representative, allow me to address your concern regarding what the passing of this bill would mean for non-Native students. But first, I'd like to touch on your reference to House Bill 216, an act which adds Alaska Native languages as official languages of the state. You use the word symbolic when describing Alaska Native languages in this bill?
That is, in fact, the actual verbiage of the bill.
False. Subsection B of House Bill 216 reads, the designation of languages other than English as official languages of the state does not require or replace a duty or responsibility on the state or municipal government to print a document or record or conduct a meeting, assembly, or other government activity in any language other than English. Nowhere in the bill will you find the word symbolic used to describe the recognition of Alaska Native languages as official languages of the state.
Well, anyway, this is a side note. I don't see how it even matters here.
It matters because what you're doing is by making such a false declaration is part of a larger system that continues to oppress Native Americans on their lands. Walter Echo Hawk's book, In the Courts of the Conqueror, examines 10 court cases whose decisions oppress Native Americans by interpreting previous legislation in whatever way non-Native authorities see fit at the time. Law, court decisions, and bills such as the one to which you refer are repeatedly misconstrued in ways that deprive Indigenous peoples of their land, languages, cultures, education, and other means of self-determination.
Sorry.
Now, back to HCR19 and what it means for non-Native students in Alaska. You're concerned that your son will be forced to learn Tlingit language and that this will somehow impede his admission to college and have the education of his dreams. Well, that's not the case with this resolution. It simply declares the current status of Alaska Native languages, which is definitely an emergency. This resolution would be a small but crucial step towards what needs to happen, which is for this issue to be on the consciousness of the greater population. I also think that Alaska Natives need to be able to define success for themselves. In the English-speaking Western world, success is defined as receiving a higher education that is generic and not local to Alaska, or any Indigenous territory. People are encouraged to leave Alaska to be successful. Learning the languages of the land that you are on connects you to it and allows you to be highly educated about the world around you. Since Alaska Native languages are currently suffering, we need to prioritize their well-being. No one will force you or your children to learn any language, but I find this concern of yours ironic, seeing as countless Alaska Native people were forced to learn English. Lastly, learning Tlingit is more likely to increase your son's chance at admission than harm them.
What? How is learning Tlingit going to help my son get into Harvard? That's awful authoritarian of you. It just seems like a slippery slope, and before you know it, we're going to be living in a communist state. It'll be just like that movie 1984, where we're forced to wear these unflattering jumpsuits.
I would like to reiterate the point stated in the resolution that, quote, 50 years of research shows that early total language immersion education for English speakers increases academic proficiency in both English and the immersion language, as well as in other academic subjects. This is quoted from lines 8 and 9 of the resolution. Bilingualism is highly beneficial to all students. It is especially beneficial for Native youth because encouraging bilingualism would strengthen their connection to their culture rather than having their education further remove them from their traditions.
That's an interesting thought, Ms. Helgeson, thank you. I think this would be a good time, though, to take a look at some of the verbiage of the proposed resolution and potential amendments I may have. For example, verbiage of your resolution says, prioritize Alaska Native languages. Are you saying that Alaska Native languages should displace the learning of other languages? That's the Webster Dictionary definition of priority.
The goal of the resolution is not to displace other languages, just to prioritize the learning of Alaska Native languages and to create equity. English is not the only language in Alaska and is not even native to Alaska. It doesn't make sense to have it as Alaska's first priority, especially when the requirement of learning English diminishes people's own ability to learn their own language.
All right then. Also, I think the language of the bill should have some consistency. On lines 10 through 12, you say, whereas indigenous people should be able to provide education in the people's own languages in a manner that's appropriate to the people's cultural methods of teaching and learning. So, you're saying that the teachers have to be indigenous. Shouldn't we say then that Alaska Natives are responsible for carrying on their own languages rather than place that responsibility on government? Lines 19 to 22 read, be it further resolved that the Alaska State Legislature encourages the governor in cooperation with Alaska Native language organizations to initiate and strengthen as appropriate legislative and policy measures that prioritize the survival and continued use of Alaska Native languages. If you're saying that teachers of the language have to be Alaska Native, then it should also say that Alaska Natives are responsible for the health of their own languages. Isn't that what an ILPAC is for? Are you or are you not discriminating based on race here? That's what I want to know.
Your proposed amendment addresses an important issue, accountability. It may seem in your language that you're only seeking consistency of verbiage, but if you break down the intention of your amendment proposition, you're actually asking us to remove government accountability for its part in revitalizing Native languages, while allowing the continued privileged authority of non-Native teachers in telling of Native stories. As for a NILPAC, it was established by Governor Sean Parnell to, quote, advise both the governor and legislature on programs, policies, and projects to provide for the cost-effective preservation, restoration, and revitalization of Alaska Native languages in the state. This is quoted from lines 13 through 15 of House Concurrent Resolution 19. The resolution is calling for the unprecedented collaboration between legislatures and culture bearers and language advocates. This collaboration would be powerful and would avoid any further damage done.
All right. Well, while we're talking about verbiage, I think the name linguistic emergency is just going to create unnecessary drama. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. But come on! This is not an emergency. It's more like an urgency. You're making my hemorrhoids flare up and I need a coffee. We should change the name to something more soothing, like linguistic state of something semi-concerning that maybe our youth should consider thinking about maybe doing something about down the road in the future if we haven't gone to Mars by then. Ah, that soothes.
Wow, okay. I'm alarmed by your disregard of the severity of the situation. Today, there are only 100 fluent speakers of Tlingit. 100 years ago, in a place like Skagway, everyone would have spoken Tlingit. Your refusal to acknowledge that colonialism is still killing these languages makes me question your value of Alaska Native languages.
What is all this talk about colonialism? Didn't that end in 1492?
Well, Representative Babler, for us to acknowledge why Alaska Native languages are still declining, we need to think past the misconception that colonialism has in fact ended. Law professor Robert Clinton's definition of colonialism includes the expansion of political hegemony over the people to whom exploited and annexed lands belong, often displacing partially or completely their prior political organization. It is true that colonialism today looks different than it did 150 years ago, but if it's truly over, why would Alaska Native languages still be declining? The U.S. government still holds supreme power of institutions and resources in Alaska, despite the known fact that this land traditionally belongs to its native peoples. As long as this is not recognized, colonialism is still acting in full swing as far as I'm concerned. Now let's get back to your comment on the title. Changing the title urgency is a racist dilution of the issue.
Are you calling me a racist?
I'm not making any assumptions about your character, but I'm saying that As a representative, you have an obligation to create equity for all that you represent. Equity means the lack of disparity. Your opposition to this resolution is perpetuating disparity. For you to question the urgency of language death in Alaska, as it does not directly affect your life, shows your comfortability in holding the English language in a superior position. This is racist.
Okay. So say I view the Tlingit language as having equal or greater value to the English language here in Southeast Alaska. Say we allow it equal space in the classroom, in public schools, and higher education. What then? How are you going to teach math and science in Tlingit? How will you say add and subtract? What about the word derivative?
Representative Babler, with all due respect, leave the linguistics to the educated, supported leaders of the indigenous language communities. You just have to say yes to this resolution. Our language leaders are supported by loving families, enthusiastic students, the hard work of the people who came before them, and their honored ancestors. Let them continue the hard work they're trained to do. The drafting of this resolution alone is the culmination of the work of hundreds of hours of language advocates and legislators. Let it be a testament to the willingness and abilities of our communities to see to its success. I'd like to add the side note that you're concerned that Tlingit is not a sufficient language to teach subjects of math and science is unfounded in any actual knowledge or proof. Until you can speak about math in Tlingit, I'll ask you to leave the basic consideration of letting speakers say what can and can't be done in the language.
Well, all right then. I suppose since we're running low on time, and you said I don't have to do any work, I move to trash my proposed amendments, end discussion for the day, and move the resolution to the committee on Thursday morning at 8.
I second that.